So if you've been following my channel for the past few months, then you have undoubtedly noticed that I've made countless videos comparing Europe to the USA. And that begs the question, why am I qualified to speak on the differences between the USA and Europe, the continent of Europe, when I've only ever lived in one European country? Well, I have a hot take to answer that question, which is that I believe that the culture of the country that I did live in, that country being the Netherlands, is a very good approximation for the culture and the cultural values of Europe as a whole. Now, before you go in my comments talking about Jordan, I'm from Spain and we have completely different values, or Jordan, I'm from Norway, don't ever say Norway and the Netherlands are the same again. I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. I completely get it. Every single country in the EU, or even outside of the EU, has its own vibe and its own values. That said, from my experiences and my observations in not just the Netherlands, but in other European countries that I've at the very least visited, I've come to realize that there are certain underlying psychological mechanisms that underpin the EU as a whole, at the very least. Bearing that in mind, before you leave that comment doubling down saying that I am wrong to say what I just said about the Netherlands being a good approximation for the EU, let's go ahead and hear Sky out, because in this video I will be reacting to a video from It's Sky, shout out to Sky, talking about how the Dutch know the secret to life that America refuses to learn. And again, I would simply replace Dutch with Europeans, because I believe that everything he says in this video will by and large apply to Europe as a whole. So save your criticism for the very end of the video. If you get to the end of this video and you still disagree with what I'm saying, then by all means feel free to share your opinion in the comments and tell me how wrong I am. That said, let's go ahead and get into this reaction.
So now here in the Netherlands, I strongly believe that the Dutch know the secret to life. People ain't over here working 3 jobs to survive, and emergencies are actually okay and won't drive you bankrupt. So what is it? What do they know that I don't know?
So I love that he brought up that Dutch people aren't just out here working 3 jobs or multiple full-time jobs. In fact, I have personally never encountered that in the Netherlands. In the US, I know off the top of my head, at least one of my family members has worked 2 full-time corporate jobs simultaneously. Still don't know how my dad was able to manage that, but in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, he did get a second job, and my mom went back to work, or she got a new job, and they made it happen. But I never really came across that in the Netherlands because, generally speaking, it's just entirely unnecessary. There's no reason because, well, the government actually cares.
And I mean, seriously, what the heck is going on here? And look, it is completely true, man. You know how I know it's true? Because out of all the comments and complaints I get on a daily basis, not one person has ever been like, you know what? I gotta get over to America. And now, in the past, I have mentioned...
That is so true. That is so very true. I don't really see a whole lot of Europeans who are really looking to go to the US, even just for tourism's sake. And I know at the very least my girlfriend, who's from Europe, when we toured the US, she was pretty underwhelmed. And honestly, I was too. And had I not visited and lived in Europe before touring the US, perhaps I would have been much more impressed. But the more of the US I saw, the more I simply confirmed what I had realized upon visiting and eventually moving to Europe, which was that Europe is just far ahead. And again, I'm generalizing here because it seems like everywhere in Europe, you can literally just throw a dart at a map and you will find somewhere that provides a higher quality of life than the US.
Ow. When I call back and I talk to some of my friends back in the States, or when people come and visit, people think that me and my wife are like rich. And listen, I'm gonna go ahead and be the first one to tell you, look, we ain't balling like that. Me and my wife first moved here about 4.5 years ago, and we moved here without jobs and with an almost 2-year-old. And since we moved here without jobs, meaning a job did not transfer us over here, we came here unemployed. That means that we pay all our taxes. We don't get the benefits of a job moving us. And also something to keep in mind is that
So, in case you're unfamiliar, basically there's an arrangement between the US and the Netherlands where when Americans are transferred to the Netherlands, they get a 30% tax ruling, which means that 30% of their income is untaxed. That is something that I myself did not benefit from either because I came on the DAFT visa, which is basically an entrepreneurial visa for American entrepreneurs coming to the Netherlands and starting businesses.
took a huge pay cut when we moved here. When we were living back in LA, I was actually doing pretty okay. I was making a way more than I was making here, as well as same with my wife. She was also making a lot more. And also too, we actually were really good with our money back in LA. We saved a lot of money because we were looking to buy a house, as well as we just never were the types to just buy a bunch of random stuff. And yeah, we were actually really good with our money. And now I bring all of this up because of the topic at hand that I wanted to talk about today, because a few weeks back, I made a video talking about what Americans spend their money on and how it's just not sustainable. Basically, everything that people needed was getting more and more expensive to the point where it's just unaffordable. All the stuff that you didn't need that you wanted was cheap and affordable versus all the things that you needed was almost unattainable. And
yes, 100%. The cost of living crisis in America is a very real thing. I know I've cited this example in a few of my recent videos, but in case you haven't seen those, when my girlfriend and I toured the USA, like I mentioned earlier, of course we had to get food along the way. And in order to save money, I primarily purchased groceries. We might have eaten out maybe 4 or 5 times in total. So I'm not even gonna count that. But just for groceries alone, I wanna say I spent something like $500 for that month. Or really, it was more like 3 weeks. And we were eating primarily canned food. If you watch those vlogs, which are all still on my channel by the way, in the Touring the USA playlist, then you saw how we were eating. I was eating canned beans and canned asparagus. She was eating canned chicken, bagged tuna, things of that nature. We were not eating the healthiest diets by any means, and we were still cashing out on groceries. So to me, that's a big part of the reason why America has such a big health crisis. And given that the pharmaceutical and medical industries are for profit and that seems to be their primary overarching concern, I don't think this is a coincidence.
man, after saying this, one of the things that was commented most in that video was how the housing prices here are ridiculous. There's like a huge housing crisis here. And this is true in the Netherlands as well as in America. Pretty much all countries have some kind of housing crisis at the moment with their major cities. It's just a fact. It's across the board. So whoever commented all these, they were not wrong. And
so that is true, but to my knowledge, the reason why these housing crises, I don't know what the correct term there is, but the reason why that exists in the US is different than the reason why it exists in the Netherlands. Honestly, I don't really know why there's a housing crisis in the US in terms of the cost, because there is pretty much infinite land to build on. So I don't really know why that's occurring. What I do know is that in the Netherlands, they pretty much halted, or at the very least, really handicapped new construction due to some sort of emissions regulation or something like that. Feel free to fill in more of the details in the comments if you're more familiar with that. Also, of course, the Netherlands is a very small country geographically speaking, so there just isn't as much land to build on.
now, I do want to make this clear that I'm not saying that people don't have problems here and everything's just hunky-dory. I am not saying that. People do struggle here. Things have gone up here. But the difference is, at the end of the day, the systems here work a lot better for the people, while in the States, it's just not the case. And now, if I haven't said this already, but I know the Netherlands is not perfect. Europe is not perfect. But like I said, I do strongly believe that they understand the secret to life. You have a problem with that? Look, pull up, GPS me, because I'm about to explain it right now. And honestly, just tell you what's happening. So to make it plain and simple, let's just say you have a table, like a table that sits in your living room. Because I'm feeling dangerous, let's just say this table has 6 legs. One of the legs is housing, another is health insurance, another is education, another is food, like groceries, and then for the last one, let's just go ahead and throw in childcare. With the way things are currently, a lot of people have have to work. There's usually no stay-at-home parent anymore. I'ma just go ahead and super say it. A lot of people are working, and a lot of people are working multiple jobs. But anyway, I was talking with a friend recently, a really good friend of mine, and she's married to my best friend, a guy that I grew up with. And I have mentioned this guy a few times on the channel only because recently he recently had a stroke. And it's really sad because this dude is my age. I met him when I left Chicago and moved to Atlanta. He was part of my whole reset on life that I had when I moved to Atlanta. And legit, we have been friends ever since. Like, I've known this guy and his family for maybe 25 years. And again,
So, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say Sky is in his late 30s. Sky, if you're watching this, correct me if I'm wrong in that, but I want to say Sky is around 37, 38, 39, something like that. To have a stroke in your late 30s is definitely unusual. Definitely unusual, but I do fear that it'll become more common with the amount of stress that Americans are having to endure on a daily basis.
we're the same age, so really keep that in mind and hear that, because it just makes it all more understandable. We're the exact same age. But yeah, I do check in on his wife to see how he's doing, to see how she's doing, because they also have a daughter, and also my wife also always asks me about them to see how they're doing. So we're constantly checking in, texting, as well as phone calls. And I'm gonna have to sadly say that it is just not going that well for them. I mean, after the stroke, everything has just been tumbling down. I mean, it's already bad enough that he can't work, so they lost that whole entire income. They also lost health insurance, life insurance, and anything that had to do with him and his job. And
So, okay, I never understood why Americans are so myopic that they can't understand that you're not just investing in other people's health, you're investing in the quality of your own life, because these are people who are giving back to the society that you benefit from. Make it make sense to me.
he had a stroke, he is able to get disability, but it's gonna take like 2 years. 2 years to get disability, which is crazy because by the time they actually get disability, they may not have nothing left. I didn't even mention some of the bills that have come in, some healthcare bills that came in. Even though they had insurance, they still had extra bills to pay because of the stroke that she cannot afford. And it's not even like she's not working. She has 2 jobs and she's trying her best, but it's just not enough. And these bills, especially these medical bills, are just piling up. One of these legs are clearly falling, and it's just a domino effect to the bottom. And this is sad because this is not only like my best friend, and I can't really do much but like send as much money as I can when I can. But it's not just sad because of that. It's sad because it really highlights that the things that you need are just unaffordable. And this happens all the time. This is how in America, in the States, you could have some kind of emergency and end up going bankrupt. And if not bankrupt, set back by years. And every time I make a video like this,
And that's the thing, you can do everything right. You can follow all of the conventional rules and be responsible with your money, get the right kind of job, even if it's a job that you don't like, but it just makes more money. You can do all of those things and still come away with nothing because of something that's completely out of your control. But America is still the wealthiest nation on the planet, right? It's the best nation on the planet. Everybody wants to go there.
do get hit with a lot of comments about how things are getting pretty bad here and how housing is unaffordable, and that is fair. But something else that's fair is that not one person has ever said that they would trade places with me or even my friend who had stroke. Not one person. Like, I mean, let me know. Would you trade places with me after I ruptured my Achilles tendon and then got sent like close to a $15,000 bill on top of still paying my monthly insurance of $450 and then also paying another $700 on top of that just for physical therapy per.
He came with the receipts. I want you to add these numbers up. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and add this up. $700 a week for physical therapy. So there are 52 weeks in a year. Achilles tendon, that takes a long time. We'll just say 8 months out of the year. So that's 52 weeks in a year times $700 a week. $36,400 in total for physical therapy for a year. But again, let's assume that it's 8 months instead of 12 months. So what would that be? 2/3. So times 0.66. That's $24,000 and some change. So a little over $24,000 plus the $15,000 plus the $450 a month. I'm not even going to add that up. You can do the math on that. That is ridiculous.
Per week? Would anybody trade with me? Like, come on, let's be real. Would anybody trade with me? And I was doing good with money. I was good with money. Which is why when I talk to friends and family back in the States, a lot of people think me and my wife are rich. Like, we're just doing it up. And they're completely forgetting the fact that I'm making a lot less. Like, I took a huge pay cut. And like, look, this is gonna sound crazy, but it's like we teleported in the future after all the hard work, after the 30, 40 plus years of all the hard work you're supposed to put in America. We just skipped all of that and we're just enjoying our life. And now our things.
Yes, right there. Basically, whenever I say that the American dream is still alive and well, just not in America, that's what I mean. In America, the whole idea is you work very hard for 30, 40, or 50 years to attain all of the things that Europeans already have. Namely, the ability to control your time and the freedom to enjoy your life. That's something that a lot of Americans simply don't have, but they've been brainwashed into believing that it's normal to have to work for those things for that long and to have to delay that gratification for multiple decades in one of the most developed nations on the planet. And honestly, I'm starting to doubt that myself, that America is one of the most developed nations, because that doesn't sound very developed to me personally.
Perfect? No. Do we still work? Yes. But we're living in the eyes of everybody else, and even in my eyes, we're doing really well. And matter of fact, we're living it up. This whole thing that we're talking about actually reminds me of a story. It's the story of a Mexican fisherman and an American banker. And now, while I tell the story, I want you to keep in the back of your mind who you are, the fisherman or the banker, or maybe in between. See, this American banker went to Mexico because he needed a vacation. He stayed in this small village where he saw this boat pull up. And it wasn't a fancy boat by any means. It was just a small boat with one fisherman in there, and he had a ton of just amazing high quality fish that he had just caught all by himself and sells the fish to make a living. So then the American banker pulls up on this fisherman because he was just amazed at how many fish of high quality that this one guy caught by himself. He then asked the fisherman, how long did it take you to catch all of these fish? And the fisherman, cool, chill, with the sauce, responds like, it only took me a little while. So then the American banker asks, so what do you do with all the rest of your time? So then the fisherman replied, dripping sauce, right? Oh, I sleep in, I fish a little, I play with my kids, hang out with my wife, we go into the village, we have drinks with some friends, and we also play the guitar. So then the American banker was like, oh, so look, you sitting on a gold mine. Look, I could help you expand this. I'm an Ivy League MBA. I got you. You can use more time fishing, buy a bigger boat with the extra money, then use that bigger boat to make more money, then expand and hire more boats and sell directly to the processor, no middle. You'll be able to control everything, including distribution. You'll need to leave this small village, go to somewhere like Mexico City, and this way you can build and run the business. So then the fisherman asks, like, with sauce, like, well, how long is that gonna take? The American banker's then like, oh, it's only like 15 to 20 years, and you'll have millions. And now, dripping too much sauce, the fisherman then asks, then what? What's after that? And the American banker then says, you can then retire, move to a small village, sleep in, fish a little bit, hang out with your kids, spend more time with your wife, go to the village in the evening, see more friends and family, and play the guitar. Come on, man. Now, come on. Tell me.
So, I've heard that story before. That's why you saw me smiling throughout it. But that's one of my favorite stories. And that actually changed my life the first time I heard that story, because I realized that I was the investment banker in that scenario, believe it or not. Now, I can confidently say I am the fisherman. I work 2 days per week, because with YouTube, or really with self-employment in general, you can create your own schedule. I don't make a whole lot of money by any means, but I managed to find a place where my income can still provide for myself and my girlfriend while she essentially learns how to fish herself and maybe puts her boat together, so to speak, so that we can fish together side by side. And I just spend the rest of my time lifting weights, watching basketball, just doing things that I want to do with my time. And one of the most important realizations that I've had, the most important epiphanies and paradigm shifts I've had since entering adulthood is that ultimately most people are going the longest possible way to get to the place that they already are without realizing it. And the reason why they're going the long way is because they want the status. They want the approval from other people. And this is what I meant when I said that I believe Dutch values are indicative of European values overall. I feel like in Europe, people embody the fisherman mentality more often than not, in that they're not willing to make these asymmetrical sacrifices in order to obtain wealth that other people don't have, because ultimately they already have the things that people want to become wealthy to obtain, at least in the US. Now, are there no wealthy people in Europe? Of course there are wealthy people in Europe. There are still the investment banker types. The point is, you have the freedom to actually choose. In the US, you don't get that luxury. You don't get the luxury of choosing between being the investment banker and the fisherman. And that right there is why I don't plan on ever moving back.
Tell me that story don't give you chills. That story is boss. And now with that story, y'all get what I'm saying, right? I mean, literally, just ask yourself, which one are you? Are you the American banker or are you the fisherman? And now, quick side note before I forget, go ahead and get down on that cookie. Go ahead. Go ahead. And now look, for me, I'm gonna be honest, I'm kinda in the middle. And that's mainly because I know what it's like to be poor, and I did my nickel, I ain't going back. But this is what I mean. This is what I mean by the secret of life. It seems like people here understand the secret of life, especially considering the systems are in place so that you can pursue the secret of life, which is having some time for yourself. And if you want to get a couple of things along the way, cool, but that's not what life is about. The life is not about the stuff. And with that, I also do want to be clear that I'm not saying that people shouldn't work. I'm not saying that at all. I love my job, I'll be honest. I love my job, and I love making videos too, to be honest. So I don't want nobody pulling up saying, look, that I'm being a hater. Y'all already know Harlem will never let me be a hater. Pull up if you want to smoke. No, but seriously though, it's mostly about what will happen when all the hard work is not paying off, to the point where you need 2 jobs, to the point where even with 2 jobs, even with a decent income, something happens and it sets you back. And the reason I say this is because people in America work hard. Americans work extremely hard.
And that's because they have to. They have to work hard because they're pulling out these crazy student loans in order to get the jobs in the first place. That right there is one of the things that I'm the most passionately and vehemently opposed to in American society. In my personal opinion, student loans are one of the most predatory traps that many people find themselves stuck in the US, because you have to think about it. They're literally coercing, and I say coercing because coming up through the primary school system in the US, they encourage you to go to college, because think about it. Everyone that you're learning from, the teachers, all had to go to college to get their jobs. So that's the only path they know. So those people are essentially conditioning the students that they need to go to college. I remember having full-on assemblies and presentations where they would show the statistics for college graduates versus people who didn't go to college. And they did that to encourage people to go to college. But then these 18-year-olds whose brains are not fully developed and they don't have the cognitive capacity to make such grand decisions about their futures, they're pulling out $50,000 to $100,000 in student loans to get a degree, to get a job that they don't even want and that they're not even particularly well suited for, just so that they can pay that $50,000 to $100,000 back. And by the time they break even, and for me, breaking even means you have $0 in student loan debt. $0. Until you have reached that point, you are still in the red in my eyes. By the time they reach that point, they're already in their 40s and 50s. And if something like what happened to Sky's friend happens to them, they are SOL shit out of luck. They are pretty much stuck. There goes retirement. Or I guess retirement isn't even an option because you can't work anymore. So Now you're retired, but you don't get to enjoy the benefits of retirement. So again, to me, that's one of the biggest traps that young Americans specifically are falling into. And to make matters worse, their parents are encouraging it. And I still, for the life of me, don't understand this. I don't understand why parents think that is good parenting to encourage their children to pull out $50,000 to $100,000 in student loans to go to college and they don't even know why they're going.
Hard. And I'm being dead serious, that's just a fact. A lot of Americans are not lazy. I know that's like everyone's default, but Americans are not lazy. Just like my friend, my best friend that I grew up with, known over 25 years, he was not a lazy dude. His wife is not a lazy person. And they actually weren't that bad with money either. But still, one bad emergency knocks the whole table down. And with them about to lose the car, she might lose her job next, because how's she gonna get to work?
Exactly. That's another trap right there that a lot of Americans fall into, and really this one isn't even optional, because if you are going to have a job that requires you to commute to the office, then you need to have a car in most of America, because most of the US, most cities that don't cost $2,000 a month plus for housing are going to lack public transit. They're not going to be walkable. They're not going to be bikeable. It's criminal that America is structured the way it is, because now you have to go and get that car loan. So now you have a car loan and student loans, and the only way you can pay them off is by getting that job, the job that you probably don't even want, and you're getting the job just to pay off the loans and maybe scrape by eating McDonald's every day. I don't know, the math just doesn't add up to me.
Need a car to get to work. And now listen, I do have to say that I know that Americans have a spending problem. Everybody knows this. But you know it's bad when normal people, the people that are doing everything right, normal Americans, are catching strays and being bankrupted just because of a medical emergency. And look, to be honest, I love America, okay? I'm gonna be real, I'm keeping it 1,000. I do love, look, I even love Chicago. And I still really like Georgia, and I really love living in LA.
I wish I could say the same. I really wish I could say the same about loving the US, but honestly, again, to my point earlier, that trip I took with my girlfriend really soured my taste for the US. And it's not like anything in particular happened during that trip. It's more that nothing remarkable happened. And I found myself thoroughly unimpressed. And we saw a good portion of the country, everything from New York City to LA to Chicago, and we saw all of this back to back to back. The Rocky Mountains, the beaches, things of that nature, and it just honestly seemed underwhelming to me personally. And I say that, again, as an American.
Love these places. But I can also say that something is terribly wrong when you have people and families living in cars and living in storage units. Something's not right. And this is all while having jobs, multiple jobs. Something isn't right. And yeah, that's how I can honestly say that the Netherlands, the Dutch, and a lot of Europe in general, they know the secret to life. They got the secret sauce. With that said, go ahead and check out this video right here, because YouTube thinks you might like it. Go ahead.
So, again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to double down on what I said earlier. I genuinely believe that everything he described throughout this video applies to, at the very least, the European Union. I don't know about the countries outside of the European Union, and of course, to varying degrees, because some countries are more individualistic than other countries within the EU. But generally speaking, people in the EU seem to have much more of a community-oriented mindset. They understand the grand scheme of things, that as a society, everyone is interdependent on everyone else. That is literally how society works. So you can't benefit from a society without giving back to it. So when people talk about, oh, Europeans are being taxed and all of this, well, clearly Americans are being taxed as well. You saw how much Sky was spending on his Achilles rupture or tear or whatever it was, his Achilles injury. That's a tax in itself. Except he's footing the whole entire bill. No pun intended.